Welcome to the About That podcast with me, your host, your favorite geek psychologist, your favorite pop culture enthusiast, your favorite queen of the nerds, Dr. Vanessa Hintz. And welcome back to all who have been on this journey with me and Dr. Carlton Green as we have been discussing the horror film, the indie horror film, Soft and Quiet. And today, my friends, I am pleased to present to you the epic conclusion to this conversation. Without further ado, please enjoy.
There's a way that we see this whole notion of the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world.
Ooh,
right?
no, that movie's. Ooh, I'm sorry.
That right, exactly right.
Oh,
But Emily is sort of like really invested, like she gets imbued with all of that, from being a teacher who is teaching a little white boy how to be oppressive to Latino women, right? There was I don't know if people would catch this. I didn't catch it the first time, but I want to highlight this for there's a reason. When Emily encounters this little white first grader who she taught the previous year in her kindergarten class, right? She encounters him after school and she sends him in to do something oppressive to these Latino women. When his mother comes up, they start talking about the little boy. And the mother says, oh, he's so helpful. He was always so helpful in class, right? Trying to do things for other people. With those types, I have to teach them how to be more assertive. Right? Think about what she's saying. She is talking about stripping away from this little white child his sort of like relational capacities, how to be in a helpful position to other people, to needing to vaunt him to a position of power. Right?
Yes.
And to really be thinking about how it is that it's possible that white women use their positionality with little white boys to do that type of work, right? Patriarchy, misogyny, sexism actually is being planted by these folks.
And right? Let's not forget
with white boys, yeah.
There was that woman who was pregnant, said she had about 10 kids. I don't know. She said she had a lot of kids, said she was a lifelong member of the KKK. The thing that she said when it was her turn to share, it starts with what mamas are teaching their babies. She said that verbatim with this big pregnant belly, right? Again, I think she said she had 5 kids. I don't know, but she said
she had 4, 5 was on the way.
It starts with what mamas are teaching their babies. And I remember when she said that, what I immediately thought of was the amount of Black mothers that I have worked with over the course of my time counseling who have had to have a conversation with their 4-year-old son, with their 5-year-old son about how they can and cannot act in certain spaces and how discrepant that was from what happened with this white boy and Emily, with how discrepant that was with what this woman was saying about what we teach our babies, what white women teach their babies versus what Black women, or I even think about, like the parents or the children of undocumented folks. Like those conversations are very different than the conversation that she was alluding to. And so I think I appreciate this point that you're making. And I think that was also when I teach students, that's one thing that I think when we're talking about how this system perpetuates itself and what it looks like, that is often an example I use because so many of the students that I work with have children, or you know what I'm saying? They know what it was like, you know what I'm saying? And so to have that conversation with them about, think about the reality of that, to have to talk to a kindergartner or a first grader about where you keep your hands. You know what I'm saying? So that you don't get hurt. How you talk to an adult so that you don't get hurt.
Yes.
And I think that those things, again, that is to me, and even talking about it now, I'm feeling it in my chest. How many people that I talk to that with tears in their eyes because they didn't want to have these conversations with a 5-year-old, with a 7-year-old, with a 17-year-old. That's not anything you ever want to talk to your child about.
Right. You're making me think about a point that I always try to make in this conversation too. Because there could be listeners who are thinking like, I don't do this with my boy children. There could be white listeners, white mother listeners, white sisters, white aunts, whatever. I don't do this with little white boys, right? And again, even if we give you the benefit of the doubt and say, yes, the benefit of the doubt, you don't do that, right? But our good colleague, Miriam Jernigan, who is a child psychologist, has really helped me with this. And in her talks to folks about race and racism around kids, she always frames a really important question for white folks in this. She tells them about how it is that she has to do exactly what you just described. How, as a Black mother, she has to be really concerned about how she's socializing her Black son to be in the world, right? The question that she always puts on the table, right? Even as many, well, I've never been in sessions with Miriam when she's done this, but I imagine, right, that there are white folks in the audience or who are participating in a session who are probably shaking their heads and probably having that like, oh gosh, that like this is just another task, right? Good white people who are thinking like, yes, this is something that Black mothers have to do. This is unfair, right? And then Miriam drops the question on them. And so, what are you teaching your white son about my Black son? Right? And absent your being proactive in teaching your white child about my Black child, your white child is going to pick up messages from the school, from the textbooks, from the movies, from the play. They're going to. So, what are you doing with regards to how you are educating your child about the experiences of Black children? Right. So even if you are somebody who is thinking like, I don't do any of the things that Emily did in the movie, or I don't I don't teach my child, or I wasn't a member of the KKK, and so I'm not passing on those values. That's fair. But what are you doing in order to be able to educate your child in order to not be those things, or how to actually be anti-racist, if you will?
Mic drop, mic drop. And child, and I think one way that, said another way, I think one thing that we often bring up in these spaces is the difference between passive and active resistance. So passive, lead. We're not teaching our children to hate. Actively, are you teaching them to value? Are you teaching them to love? Are you teaching them to accept? And the other thing that I'll say as we sort of move into the closing part of the conversation, teaching your child to not see difference is not helpful. Let me just say that again. It's not, I don't see color, I don't see difference, you're just like everyone else. That's not helpful. I think that when we talk about actively teaching your children to value, it is teaching people that different is not deficient.
Right.
Different is just different. And I think that that in space, particularly when we're talking about children, because I do think that there are many well-intentioned folks that work with children, whether we're talking about parents, whether we're talking about teachers, caregivers, coaches, whoever, that have been taught or that think that me not teaching hate or me teaching children to just see everybody as the same is helpful, when actually it's not. It's actually not. And that's my professional opinion. Let me just say that it's not helpful. And so as we move into sort of the end of this conversation, first of all, this has just been amazing.
I want to follow up on something else that you said that we didn't unpack, and I don't know if you were moving into this as part of the conclusion because we didn't really work with it. That yes, this movie is about white lady terrorism, right? And to your point earlier, you don't have to be a white lady to participate in this type of soft and quiet terrorism. Mm-hmm. Right? There are so many examples across history that help us to understand that others who are not white ladies can participate in the soft and quiet terrorism. Mm-hmm. One of the examples that comes to mind for me, and we won't unpack this too much, and it's interesting because so much is being said about Clarence Thomas these days, right? Ooh. Clarence Thomas's presentation, occupation of the Supreme Court seat that he has held now for something like 30 something years, I think. We know that for a preponderance of his career, he was quiet, right? It almost in a way as to try to appear soft.
Yes.
But then Clarence Thomas, like people who are soft and quiet, what they're actually doing is trying to maintain their own proximity to power in order to do the work of oppression.
Woo!
Right? Whether or not, even if we think about it this way, right? Here's another way for us to think about this. We have these affirmative action policies that get rolled out that are actually supposed to be about, that are actually in response to the push for civil rights, specifically by Black people, right? What we end up seeing, right, and this is documented across history, is that the folks who benefit most from affirmative action strategies are white women.
Bloop.
Right? And so it's almost as though the United States invests again in the soft and quiet type of strategy. Let's, white women experience sexism, right? That's an ism that we need to be accountable for. So let's, value them. Let's include them. Let's move them into these roles that actually come on the backs of Black people fighting for equality, right? And not only that, right? But then we see again some other things that keep happening around, so like the push for racial equality. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about this. We see this research that just keeps coming out here recently that's talking about the role of the chief diversity officer and who's occupying that space, right? The research is consistently telling us that these chief diversity officer roles, which probably originate again out of sort of like the civil rights push and early multicultural, what were we calling it back then? Minority student affairs efforts on college campuses that evolved into multicultural services that then have become about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice and belonging, right? All of that is really, again, we have to attribute to Black folks making a push for equality, right? Without Black folks, without Black students on college campuses making pushes for equality, we don't have a chief diversity officer role. We don't have anybody on the campus, right? Or in businesses for that matter, whose sole effort is to focus on diversity related issues, right? And what do we see currently? White folks make up more than 4/5 of the people who hold these types of roles.
Let me tell you what we see currently. Let me tell you what we see currently. So, statistically speaking, to your point, and these are statistics that were taken from Zippia, the career expert website. 76% of chief diversity officers are white. 76%. Let me say it louder for the people in the back. 76% of chief diversity officers are white. 55% of these are women. 45% are men. And I saw something recently. I saw a post recently where it was a woman of color, I believe it was a Black woman, that was talking about these statistics and talking about how there is I would say you feel some kind of way about someone being in a position that is focused on belonging, justice, equity, that has not been oppressed. And I think that the point that she was making is racism is a different kind of oppression. Racism is not sexism. Racism is not classism. Racism is not ableism. And the point that she was making is for people who have not experienced racism to be in these positions, it's almost like, what are we doing? And I think that's to the point that you're making also. And I have to really, contend with that, of how I feel about that, right? Like that's something I need to think about. But what I will say is, to the point that you're making, and this is personal to me because I've very recently been in an experience where I was harmed because I wasn't soft and quiet. I was harmed by an organization. I was harmed by a woman who looks like me. I was harmed by many women who look like me because I wasn't soft and quiet. And I did not want to be that way because it felt like that was not aligned with me personally. That was not aligned with my values. And the realization that I came to that is the way I would have to be to be successful, quote unquote, in this space that I was operating in was a very tough pill to swallow. It was a very tough pill to swallow. And I would say that it was a tough pill to swallow, and I have not ever in my life felt more fulfilled than I feel right now. You know what I'm saying? And I think that that emotion that we put into this work is something that I think these statistics do not reflect. The emotion, that the heart that we bring to this work. And this is not a shade. This is not to say that those 76% of white people that do this work don't do it with emotion. It's just a different type. It's just a different type. And again, what is motivating me versus what motivates them, whatever, right? I just think that I think operating in this space, particularly because you spoke about, the birth of affirmative action, DEI spaces. Think about how this industry has ballooned since over the last 3 years. At the time of this recording, we're a little over 3 years from the murder of George Floyd. The 3-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder just passed. Think about how many of these positions sprung up in the last 3 years. And then think about how different the world looks now versus 3 years ago. Don't worry, I'll wait. If we want to talk about how different it looks, right? And so I think that correlatively, if we think about the fact that 76% of people in these executive C-suite level positions doing diversity work are white, and over the past 3 years, what changes have we really seen? Make it make sense. And again, that's not a shade. It's not a shade. I want to underscore it's not a shade. It's an observation.
Right. And I think that if we're gonna like pull these things together, what I am suggesting and building off of what you're putting down is that it's almost as though especially if we're thinking about white folks holding these CDO roles in such large numbers, it's almost like a Trojan horse, right? So you have white folks who have these interests or get these jobs and they get sent in, right? And a part of the CDO role, I think as it was probably initially conceptualized, right? Or whoever's doing this type of activity on a college campus or in a business, they are supposed to be transforming the organization to make sure that opportunity is available to those who have been historically marginalized and minoritized, right? And more often than not, right? Well, I shouldn't say more often than not. That person has that role, or that person has the gender, or the skin tone, or something, right, about them that says that they would be there working for the people who have been historically oppressed in the organization, right? Well, what we know, especially from the soft and quiet way, right, is that people can go into these CDO roles and they can actually be overtly racist or sexist or trans negative or whatever it happens to be, to the degree that they don't actually understand how to do that work, right?
Yes.
And don't actually do something that we say in DEI work all the time, that folks really need to do the self-reflective work and deal with their own internalized biases and own internalized privilege and all those types of things, right? More often than not, right, a person who has been promoted to this level of work may not create any space in their lives for being able to do that type of self-reflection, because on some level they have arrived, right? They have been. They are now in the C-suite because of the history of work that they put together. Or, right, now they're supposed to be the expert who doesn't necessarily need to do any of that type of self-reflective self-work, right? So that's one way that we get to see how it is that you could be a white woman in this role, or even a person of color in this role, and not necessarily doing the work of sort of like ongoing development around these issues, and you can become oppressive to the people in the organization. The other way that we see that folks can ascend to this C-suite CDO type of role, that they can operate in their roles is that they can focus on doing the work of sort of like maintaining the rules or paying attention to the rules, what I would call sort of like doing the compliance work, right? We want to make sure that we're meeting all of these compliance goals or these compliance numbers, or just making sure that we're following the law, right? And if we go back to what we know about laws and rules and policies in these organizations, historically, those have always been in place to make, and those have always been in place to make sure that we protect people in power, or we protect the organization, right? Or we protect the organization's reputation. Oftentimes, the work of justice is going to be at odds with the organization's reputation.
Come on.
It's going to be at odds with sort of like the policies and the practices that are there that have benefited some folks, right, and actually harmed others, right? And so if a CDO person is taking the approach of trying to do compliance work, or do the rules of do the work of making sure that we're meeting these rule-based sort of like goals, right? Then what they're actually doing is they're participating in oppression.
Yes.
Right. And we know, again, right, they're like, let me see if I can make this bridge. There are also some agencies, some schools, some organizations that situate their DEI efforts in human resources.
Yes.
Right. And we know that, you can talk to almost any person who has filed a complaint with human resources about something that feels racist or sexist, or that feels like it was harmful to them as a result of some type of identity-related violation. What you will hear from most people is that, oh, HR was not actually working for me. HR was working to make sure that they were working in favor of the institution, right? And if my interests are not aligned with the institutions, oh, I'm not getting any type of resolution out of this interaction with HR, right? And what we know from the research is that most leaders of HR are white women, right? There is a way that we really have to be asking ourselves how this soft and quiet phenomenon operates in so many spaces where there's the possibility for real liberatory, transformative work to be done, but it doesn't. And let's think about those, right? 80% of teachers in elementary and secondary education settings are white women, right? And this is an observation that we've made before in doing some work in another setting. Most of the psychologists working in the Federal Bureau of Prisons are white women, right? We should really be asking ourselves and taking a look at, or really trying to understand this phenomenon. I know that I have a colleague who has been trying to put this question on the table too. Like, what is the relationship here, right? Even if we think about the school to prison pipeline, even if we think about that, or the school to prison pathway, if you will, there are white women all along that pipeline, doing softly and quietly the work, oftentimes, of oppression. That's not to say all white women. That's not to say, right, because you might get some letters or emails, or people trying to.
It's not a shade. It's not a shade.
It's really not. Because on some level, white women have to, and this is why white women need to watch the film. White women need to be grappling with, how am I participating in this?
Yes.
How have I been socialized? How have I been racial and genderized, if you will? I just made up that word, right? To participate in this. And will I actually do the work of unlearning this? Will I do the uncomfortable work of unlearning this? It's really that simple.
I'm sitting here receiving what you're saying, and I'm like that emoji with the mind blown, like the bomb. I want to just underscore one thing that you just said, which is doing the uncomfortable work. It is difficult. It is messy. It is a lot of things. It is not easy. It does not happen overnight. And as somebody who operates in this space, more often than not, how many times have we heard, just tell me what to do? Just tell me what to do. From white people, from men, from people with power, from hetero, you know what I'm saying? Like from anybody who has some sort of semblance of power and privilege, just tell me what to do. And from two professionals, that isn't how it works. That ain't how it works. You know what I'm saying? And so if there's anything that I could say in terms of all that we've discussed and the film, I just want to underscore, first of all, I want to thank you again and underscore what you said about the power that I think this film has is not only the discomfort generator, right? Because I think that discomfort is a precursor for change. We need to feel that way. Even me, myself, and I, who said I was never going to watch this again, I probably need to, right? Like I need to sit in that tension, right? Not only does this film generate that discomfort, but again, to be critical. We talk about being critical, and you said it so beautifully. What am I doing to either maintain or challenge these systems, the systems inherent in this movie? You even see systems of hierarchy within them white women. How is Emily treated because she's so pretty, right? Because she's this, because she's that. And how is Leslie treated because she was locked up? You know what I'm saying? Like, how am I maintaining, reinforcing these systems? And how am I actively working to dismantle them? And I think that, again, that is why, will it happen? No, I'm very pessimistic. But that is what I think the power and the utility of this film is and can be. You know,
the last thing I'll say, and you can wrap us up, right, is that even as you are making references to white women saying, well, tell me what to do, right? What do I do, right? I want to point out that that's actually a manifestation of soft and quiet. Because what it is feigning sort of like, I'm a damsel in distress. I need help, right? I'm powerless. I don't know what to do. Somebody rescue me. Somebody save me, right? It is really a disavowal of agency, particularly around racial issues, that white women expect, right? And this is a part of the way that these paradigms are set up, right? Where white women expect that other people will do this work for them, right? And I'm oftentimes saying to people, that's just a new and evolved form of slavery. You want me to do the work for you, or to outline the work that you need to do in order to be accountable for a system that you actually participate in and maintain. Make it make sense.
Make it make sense, Lord.
Right. The last thing I'll finish with is a recommendation for folks if they are actually interested in this work. There's an author. Her name is Esther Armah. She has written a book called Emotional Justice. And a part of the premise, I think, the way I understand her work, is that she's saying we have tried a lot of different approaches to diversity, equity, inclusion work, right? One of the things that gets in the way is that there are disparate amounts of emotional labor that are expected of people trying to do the work. And if we're going to bottom line it, what she says is that white people are not expected to do any of the emotional labor. They actually fight to be comfortable in the process of doing this work. So her book really outlines what I think she calls it, so like a new paradigm for DEI work, how it is that we need to do this racial justice work or this emotional justice work in order to get to a place of racial justice. And she outlines, I think in the book, I shouldn't keep saying I think, in the book, she outlines work that white men have to do, that Black men have to do, that Black women have to do, and that white women have to do. Right? And she's very clear, we all have different work that needs to be done. So if you're listening to this, right, and you're a white person, a white man, a white woman thinking about this work, that could be a really important resource for you to pick up to think about what exactly is the work that I need to be doing in order to do something about racial inequities.
I just added that book to my cart just so everybody knows, because yes, and I want to thank you again, because I think this has been not only enlightening, it's been an experience for me. Whenever I'm in your presence, I feel like I just things just come out. I don't even know. And so I appreciate you sort of sharing in this space and cultivating this space in a way that, even though there were parts of it that I'll be very transparent were uncomfortable for me, right? To talk about my proximities to whiteness, to talk about my, hesitancy to really confront things, even as a person who does this work, right? If I could leave you all with something, it would be that to me is not a flaw. It's something that I'm working to accept in myself, right? Like, I don't feel like I have to be ready to be emotionally battered and bruised every day, all the time, to be a quote unquote good DEI practitioner. And so I hope that the thing that I would want to leave everybody with is that wherever you are in this moment is where you are. That's where you are. And I think that all we can do is acknowledge where we are and think about where it is that we want to go. Do those things at the same time.
Start wherever you are.
You better say that.
Start wherever you are.
Woo-wee.
Well, I want to say thank you for having me on your podcast, right? I look forward to continuing to work with you and figuring out how it is that we can be in collaboration together, right? If people are looking for me, they can go to Twitter or to Instagram. I am there as Dr. C.E. Green, all one phrase, DrCeGreen. In either of those spaces, you can DM me on I think there's a Linktree access on those accounts as well, where people can be in touch with me.
And please hit us up if y'all watch this movie and let us know how you received it, what lessons, what messages you got from it. And as always, I wish you and your families safety, health, and joy. Until next time, beautiful people.